Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. Please join me and my guest on this next interview. Central Europe is on high alert as heavy rains and severe flooding are forecast to hit over the weekend, affecting the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Austria, Germany, and Slovakia. Authorities are taking action by releasing water from dams, erecting sandbag walls, and canceling public events. Meteorologists compare the situation to the deadly floods of 1997. Joining us today on TVP World to discuss the looming crisis is Mateusz Grygoruk, professor at Warsaw University of Life Sciences. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good afternoon.
So can you help us understand what the scale of the flooding is risking Central Europe is facing this weekend, and how serious could it become?
So the situation is very serious. However, it is not an unknown phenomenon in our region. So first of all, it is worth of remaining that the average annual amount of precipitation in this part of Europe is approximately 600 millimeters. Nowadays, for the coming 2 days, we expect the rainfalls as high as 300 millimeters. So to put things short, we might expect the precipitation, the rainfall that normally occurs during half of year, that can fall down only in a couple of days. So the situation is very serious. However, the situation is not unknown.
All right. How are the Czech Republic and Hungary preparing for anticipated flooding? Because we do know that, well, there's a similar situation in 1997 where Warsaw was flooded by water coming from neighboring countries. Are they ready for the situation?
We all tend to be ready. Czech Republic and Austria are doing very well. I am not that much aware of the situation in Hungary right now, but what I know is that keeping in mind the forecasts for the coming days, water management authorities are releasing water from their reservoirs. They are making some room for new water that can come. However, the amount of precipitation which is expected is much higher than the regular reservoirs are constructed for. Therefore, it is not very easy to forecast whether these actions can successfully mitigate the high precipitation events that are expected to happen. So what I would say is that those countries are doing their best, and I'm very happy to see what happens in the Czech Republic and Austria. Please keep in mind that all of those actions are being now done well ahead, a couple of days ahead of the event. So I would say the flood risk management is now occurring, and it's at its best we can expect. So I would say we do everything we can, both in Poland, in Austria, and in Czech Republic. But still, as said before, the amount of precipitation can be much higher than we might be ever prepared for. And therefore, I would not exclude some dramatic events that might happen over the coming days.
Right. So are we at the risk of them potentially having to let some water into this part of the country?
Well, I guess so. So all of the forecasts are saying that over the coming days, the precipitation will be increasing. But there are several issues around. So first and foremost, when we look at our neighboring countries, let's say not direct neighbors, but with Austria, over there we face not only with the precipitation that is running right now, but we also have a lot of snowfall in the Alps. This situation is somehow helpful to mitigate the flood because some of the rain that falls is still kept in the mountains, so it does not feed the rivers directly. But then at the same time, the amount of snow which is there is not the amount of snow that people could ever be prepared for at this time of year. So this means that both of the facts are quite unusual. In our case, in the case of Poland, we don't have that many measures that can be applied to mitigate this flood, but still we might ask ourselves the question whether the increased amount of reservoirs in mountainous rivers could help. I am afraid that this big amount of precipitation can never be stored in any numbers of reservoirs. So that is why it is so much important to make this flood prevention actions not only within the place where the water is going to, so not only within the river valleys, but also outside of river valleys in all of those places which feed the river with new water. So I think we are prepared, but I expect that these things might be rather dramatic. The other thing is that the situation of the atmospheric pressure over Poland now is quite specific. So this low pressure system, which is entering Poland from south or from Czech Republic, Now it might be blocked by the high pressure system, which is now stagnating somewhere over the Belarus and Russia. So this means that these rain events, even though they are not that much that high as they are expected to be in the Czech Republic, they might stay with us for a couple of days more or a couple of hours more, which means that the exposure of the country for these negative events can be a bit higher than expected. However, these situations they used to be observed for over the last years, and as you said, it was 1997, very similar, 2002, 2010, the same atmospheric situation over the Central Europe, but it always behaves a little bit different. So this means that we might expect some changes comparing to the former phenomena like this, and nothing is certain at the moment.
All right, now there's a recent drought in a lot of some rivers, particularly with record low river levels like the Vistula. Some are saying that this actually will have an impact and complicate the flood situation as dry land is unable to absorb much water. Do you think that the recent drought and low water level would provide enough space to contain some of these water, or is it actually going to exacerbate the situation?
So it all depends. It all depends on the site. In some sites which kept dry for a month right now, it might be really hard for water to be penetrated, like from the topsoil to the deeper parts of an aquifer. So this is aspect number one. Aspect number two is that we are now in Poland, we are experiencing something unusual. So in the southwest, in the area of the river basin of Oder and all the other tributaries over there, we have flood alerts, whilst in the northern and east part of Poland, we have drought alerts. So the situation is very diverse, but I would say of course, empty rivers can be somehow helpful in transferring water within the river channel. But as said before, I think the many things happen outside of the river. So they happen in the areas that experience drought over the last couple of weeks. So infiltration of water on these areas cannot be that easy as we expect. So therefore, in case of an intense rain event, most of this water can be transferred directly from the upland to the river valley, which might increase the flood exposure within the valley. But as the rivers are quite empty, as you said, then it might be a little bit more helpful than in the past, because in the past, this situation, these systems of low pressure from Genoa were following rather humid periods. So there was a lot of water in landscape. So perhaps it will not be that dramatic. But I would say everything will be clear tomorrow, day after tomorrow, when we already know what is the speed when this front is getting towards Poland from the south, and for how long this low pressure system can stay with us.
Right. Now, a lot of people are trying to draw conclusions and similarities of this upcoming event with the devastating flood of 1997. Are there some similarities or any lessons that we have learned from that past flood?
I mean, this is, I wouldn't call it usual situation, but this situation is quite known in our meteorology. So this happens every now and then, every couple of years. So when we compare this flood to the former floods, the reason behind them is quite the same. What changed over the years is our perception of flooding and the level of preparation for that. So I would say in the 1997, I remember that flood well. I wouldn't say very well, but well. Everything was a surprise. Nowadays, we can log into the servers. We have very good early warning systems, so we know more or less what might happen along the course of rivers. So in case something happens, the closer we are to the situation, the better the forecast can be. And this is one. So the two, I think we are much better prepared. We know what can be the consequence of the high precipitation event. We know which areas are exposed to flood, because since the 1997 we made our homework quite well. So there are flood risk maps and everything is done much better. However, the amount of precipitation we might expect is very high, so it doesn't mean that nothing is going to happen. Some things might be expected because this type of situations are very hard to be prepared for.
Right, like you mentioned, it is a very volatile situation and it could be a bit hard to predict and prepare for. What kind of scenarios should we prepare for during for the weekend? And what are some of the things, possible outcomes that could happen that we can kind of predict ahead of time to prepare ourselves?
So I think that the government is doing quite well in terms of addressing all of those alerts to people who are exposed to the flood the most. I would say we might expect the worst, because we should always be prepared for the worst. We should remember that we have our flood prevention system. We have the dikes. We have reservoirs. These are all engineering facilities, and engineering facilities are meant to work in certain conditions. The conditions that we are going to face over the coming days are not a usual situation. This situation is known. We are prepared for that, but we must remember that all of those engineering systems will be working over the coming days in very heavy conditions. So that is why we might expect some failures of dikes. We might expect some failures of bridges. We might expect some failures of reservoirs, or maybe the capacity of reservoirs can be exceeded in the shorter time than expected. But nevertheless, there is not many more we can do in terms of mitigate this risk. I would say we should keep safe. We should keep not very close to the river. We should avoid traveling around in those places which might be exposed to flood. That's it. I mean, this is an environment. When we started to put our fingers to the landscape of river valleys, then we must know that there are some moments that we have to pay for that. And this is one of those very unique moments.
All right, looking down the future, how would these floods impact regional kind of agriculture and food supply over the next few months?
Well, it's very hard to say. It all depends on the damages. But when you look at the agriculture nowadays, I mean, we are nearly at the end of the season, so most of the crops are already harvested, and I wouldn't expect many things to be lost. So I think this is not a problem. The bigger problem might be when we face some failures of engineering systems like bridges or dikes. So this is for sure risky, but this is always a risky business. I think also that we should think about this flood as about something which is not unexpected. So all of the climatic change scenarios that were created for this part of Europe for the last that have been created for the last 20 or 30 years, they all said the same. They said that we might expect long droughts, very long droughts, which can be intermitted by some short, very intense rainfalls like this one right now. So this is not an unusual situation when you look at the forecasts that have been already prepared. So the scientists, water managers were always saying that this will happen. The more events like this are happening right now, the more we are aware that the consequences of them might be quite problematic to us as a society, and we should live with that risk. Maybe this would influence our perspective and perception of a river. So the rivers must have some more space. They must have kept their floodplains. We must give them some more room. But still, I wouldn't expect much problems when it's related to agriculture or the energy production, unless something really serious happens in terms of the failures of engineering systems.
All right, and last but not least, you just mentioned maybe the perception of how we interact with these river and bodies of water should be taken a look at. Do you think that perception will change anytime soon?
We work with this quite heavily over the last, I would say, tens of years. And the problem is that the issues of droughts and floods are a little bit different. So droughts are slow, and we start to be acquainted with the drought. So the drought, when it occurs, then we are more or less acquainted with that. But flood is always a very, very dramatic, very quick event. So it happens just now. And that is why the perception of a river during the flood is always negative. So I would say that those phenomena, like the flood that we are expecting right now, they might change our perception in a way that it's better not to touch the dog. Okay, so the dog can bite. Better not to touch the river in this dramatic way as we used to do over the last 50 years. And if we leave this dog in a good conditions, well fed, with a good room, then the dog will be friendly. So maybe this comparison can help us to understand what should be the perception of a river. River is nice. River sometimes have problems. Droughts and floods are inherent elements of riverine landscapes and hydrological cycle. So the more we face these extremes, the more we are acquainted with them, the more we know how to deal with them. And the river is just an element of our life.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.